I'm glad you're all here today. So about me, I've been at Adobe for a little more than 10 years. I've kind of run the gamut from analytics to A/B testing and personalization. And for the past few years, I've been very focused on content and digital asset management specifically, as well as some new initiatives we've got going on around 3D and immersive technologies, but yeah, definitely oriented around content and how all that's really changing and what we need to do in the market to help businesses like you really kind of deliver against some of your big and aggressive and interesting goals. So what we're hoping to kind of talk about here today is really what it means to build a content engine. And you might have been struck by that term, and you might have been a little bit skeptical of, what's this going to be? Or tell us about this content engine. What is it? What I want to say as we begin the conversation is that I don't define content engine as any one thing. I don't think it's one piece of technology. I don't even think it's your stack. I don't even think it's your ecosystem of technology. I think it's all those things, but it's also the people and the processes and the teams and the governance and the goals and the culture of each of your organizations. And so, as we start to explore that as a group here, there are going to be a lot of things that come up. Some things that are very specific to one industry or another. And then things that are common to all of us. The other thing that, definitely we can't ignore right now, and certainly this is not going to be a conversation about how we, specifically, do content better during a pandemic. But, I think, and we were talking about this with the smaller group before we started today, this has been interesting in a number of ways for us. Some of you have been affected very, very dramatically. You were laid off from your organizations, or you may have been furloughed, or your companies may have gone through more crisis than that. Maybe some companies have gone under, and that's tragic. I think that what this is kind of showing us, though, is that there were perhaps some vulnerabilities. There were some things that we do in the course of kind of our normal content operations that maybe could have been happening more efficiently. Maybe, we're kind of learning, as I said when we were just talking about the introduction, maybe we're finding innovative and really interesting ways of doing things, or opportunities that we weren't even aware of before. And I think you're going to hear about that a little bit from some of the panelists here in just a few minutes. So again, I want to just kind of set it up. We're going to be talking about how you look at things like your content lifecycle, and how content velocity sort of plays a role in that, and really kind of what that means, and what it means to actually think about your concept of a content engine. We have some great panelists, and so without further ado, I'd like to kind of bring them up to the virtual stage. We're going to start with Cliff.
I'm Chief Integrated Marketing Director with iHeartMedia. Media. Most of you know us as iHeartRadio. And my role is really to build partnerships and leverage the plethora of things that we do, the platforms, to really help businesses grow. And for us, if you can imagine when COVID hit, no one being able to go into the radio stations, including personalities who have shows, with the exception of two morning shows that did continue to come in. We had to get everybody reacclimated to broadcasting from their home. And that was very scary when you have 1 million listeners for a radio station to broadcast out of your house. So we were pleasantly surprised at the quality and the technology we were able to use. But this time has also been a great time for being in the audio world, because of the fact that we had seen huge spikes in listenership. Even though they weren't in their cars, they were able to stream our content over 250 different devices, including smart speakers and smart televisions and what have you. But it turned out that we saw a huge spike where where people listening in their cars had diminished because everybody was at home. We were so glad we were in that space. And then the other thing that really turned out great is our ability to build our podcast network, which is now the largest in the country on the iHeartRadio app. So there were some silver linings in there. I won't lie, you know, there were definitely some, with businesses closed, there were some halts on advertising campaigns all over the country because they had nothing to advertise. And the businesses that were able to be born out of this and pivot really did that, and we were able to help them through this.
My name is Rebecca Rozakis. I'm Director of Content Marketing at Kaltura. We're an online video platform. And we've been, from a content perspective, we've definitely been affected by the current situation. We had the either extreme good or bad fortune to launch a new product, which was a virtual meetings product about 2 weeks before this hit. So that was one of the more disrupted launches I've ever seen, where we kind of had to throw all of our plans out and basically rebuild them on the fly. It was bonkers. But from terms of workflow, this actually hasn't been affecting us that much. We're a really international company. My team is scattered across the New York area, but also Rhode Island, London, Tel Aviv, and a couple other random places, with a lot of my creative folks are in Tel Aviv. So we'd always been very remote. We'd always been very virtual to begin with. So I've definitely got some thoughts and feelings on that, which may or may not be helpful. In terms of challenges, I think our biggest challenge continues to be we have an absolutely bonkers number of product lines for the size of our marketing team. So trying to keep up with, like, ideally, I'd love to have, you know, a perfectly organized marketing funnel with content at each stage and everything organized. We have too many separate funnels, so we have just piecemeal all over the place. So the big challenge with our company really is trying to keep as much of those gaps filled in and current, and also having all that material available to our sales team so that they can find all of it, because there's so much.
Okay, we're going to go to Gary next.
Hi. My name is Gary Bramnick. I'm the Director of Marketing Communications at an organization in Philadelphia called Inglis. It's a almost 50-year-old organization serving a population of people with physical disabilities. So in addition to a long-term care community, we don't like to use the term nursing home. We have numerous other aspects of the organization, such as we're the largest developer and private developer of affordable, accessible, independent living housing for people with physical disabilities. We have an adaptive technology division that is nationally recognized, day programs, lots of other things. So we are experiencing very unique things during this COVID crisis. I think when you talk about challenges, in my previous life in the healthcare space, in hospital marketing and communications, you were forced to engage people with content that was both informative but emotionally driven, so that you were connecting to the decision makers of healthcare choices to say, select us. When all of a sudden, choice became a huge part of the healthcare space because employees were now paying a huge component of their health benefits, so they were able to make a choice of where they got their health taken care of. For us now, we have ramped up our communications externally, but we're trying to find that unique balance between navigating informative information to our staff, to our residents, to our families, to our donors, that is information through this pandemic and the fears that that causes, while maintaining some issues of health information and privacy, to list, like any other place, we've been affected by COVID, but so we need to share that information, but how do you share that in an effective and appropriate way so people aren't afraid, but people know that you're being transparent as well?
Okay, next person is Cicek.
So my name is Cicek Tilley. I work as a Director of Marketing at Lupin Pharmaceuticals. some of you might have heard Lupin. It's actually a big generic pharmaceutical manufacturer in the United States, but I work on the specialty division on a branded product. And it's for a women's health condition, and it's for a vaginal infection, which is very common. And it's an antibiotic. So we've had some challenges because this is a condition where women actually sometimes even wait under normal circumstances, forget about a pandemic. But because of the pandemic, obviously, they didn't want to go to the doctor. Some of the doctor's offices were closed. So we definitely switched all of our efforts to more being digital, including our sales force who used to, actively go into doctor's offices. We're now switching to virtual calls and virtual in-service lunches and different things that they implemented. But we are small, but very agile and flexible company. So we've really adapted very quickly. And funny enough, just before the pandemic started, we already had in plan to have a telehealth initiative for our product. And obviously we had to fully speed the launch of that initiative. And yesterday we just launched it. So
wow.
Our product, yes, thank you,
Congrats.
is actually available through a virtual doctor's appointment. We partnered with a reputable telehealth company. And so we're excited. We're able to provide that service to our patients now, which was much needed. And also from a messaging standpoint, from a content standpoint, obviously we have had to switch a little bit. First of all, we have a new campaign that we launched, and our messaging and our content is much more relevant right now for our patients. And we really want them to take action. So it's geared more towards, what we want to achieve, right? So it's aligned with our strategic imperative of empowering women to go speak about their condition and talk to a doctor. And besides, now, obviously, if you look at what content picks up traction in media, is all about COVID and pandemic, right? So even the press release in certain areas, we want to highlight that such that, people pay attention to our messaging and, read it and pick it up. So, so we definitely made some adjustments to our regular business, but, it's an interesting, fun time.
Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing that. And Jeffrey.
Jeff Fleischman, CMO of a company called Altimetrik. We're a digital transformation company. We help companies with business and IT transformation, everything from data, DevOps, platform engineering, so a hardcore tech company. So content. So I've worked at Amex, built the Amex website, worked for Citibank and some other companies, mostly financial services. And content, without realizing it, content became a very large component of what I do. And what I tell people is congratulations, you're in the publishing business, because content is like publishing. It never stops. It's work. It's dynamic, and it's not a PDF. A lot of people think, content's a PDF. I'll put it on the website. It's not. It's dynamic in terms of the place, the positioning, and the device. So one piece of content can be repurposed and morphed a dozen different ways. And it's just not that easy. What I'm finding from a challenge perspective, we have a lot of clients like Ford and Citibank and PayPal and Novartis and very large companies. And their challenge is that with COVID, it's turned everything upside down. It's accelerated their business models to places they're probably heading, with content being a key portion of that. And content both internally as well as externally. So in my company as CMO, we set up a Facebook page for employees. So we can share everything from pets and cooking and whatever, just to have a better way of engaging that's been lost by not being in offices. But for our clients as well, content has become a necessity, even if there was some doubt, as a tool and as a method to stay connected to clients and things like that. So I'd say that. And the last thing I'd say is a challenge is data is also, the data element of content, right? So marketing has become a very data and technology based discipline. So when you put content out there, you just don't put it out there. You know, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? What are you getting for it? Because a lot of your business partners will question, why are we spending money on content? Why do we need to do this? Why can't we just put something out there and leave it for a while? So data becomes a very, very important instrument for you to use to be able to demonstrate to your colleagues what you're doing and what the company gets for it.
Got it. Thanks, Jeff. You know, you partially answered the question that I wanted to kind of explore with you a bit more before we kind of move on to the next topic. I had put out this little question to everyone, just asking this, you know, I'm curious, like, are these initiatives being accelerated or are they being stalled right now? Certainly, you know, when we look at some of our customers, there are some initiatives that are in some sectors that are stalling at the moment. Some industries have slowed down so dramatically, and I think knee-jerk reaction to that might be to just halt on everything. A very sort of forward-thinking reaction to that might be to go, this is our chance to just kind of innovate and start to invest for when we get out of this, or even for when this happens again, or whatever the case may be. When I asked the question here of the group, most people, everybody who answered said that their digital initiatives have been accelerated. And because like in you're different than the other folks here on the phone in that you work for an organization that helps other organizations with their digital transformation and with their digital strategy. So I appreciate the fact that you bring a perspective where you're seeing a lot of different things going on from your vantage. And does it surprise you that everyone's answering accelerated here to that question?
It doesn't. Because of COVID, it's actually necessitating the need to create content. And it just, even physically, you can't be in touch with people like you were. So content was always important for companies to project out who they are, what they do, what type of, someone mentioned emotionally engaging content can be used to connect to other people. So it doesn't surprise me. What we're finding is most companies are not cutting back on areas that help drive better engagement with their clients and even with their employees. What they're pushing back on are some of the projects that can be done later in the year or going into next year. So we're not seeing a huge pullback. Now, if COVID comes back a second time and things get shut down, I think it can get ugly. But right now, I think what's nice is that this might be more of a seismic event for people who are on the content side of the business, because it's become much more needed and much more critical, even for people who would have said 2 months ago, yeah, content's a bit overrated.
Got it. So to jump into kind of the heart of this conversation, I want to go back to you, Rebecca, and something that you said. You were describing a scenario that that I can certainly relate to. You know, working for a company that develops and sells, you know, technology for a lot. Like, we have a lot of products. I think you guys know that. Some of them are sold to, you know, individual photographers or students, and they buy from adobe.com. Others are enterprise software, you know, big investments, longer sales cycles, more of that classic funnel that you described. What you described was something that is not COVID specific. It's not something that you're experiencing just right now. You're talking about something that, you know, as a content marketer, you need to find the right piece of content for the right touch point at these different points in a customer journey, pre-sale, post-sale, et cetera, et cetera. So when I say content engine and say, like, you know, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? How do you address that challenge today in terms of the right content or nice piece of, you know, snackable content or the white paper or whatever it is? Like what is the approach that you take today?
Well, what we have right at this moment in active place is non-sustainable, which is that I personally have an encyclopedic knowledge of everything we've done in the last 5 years. And people come to me and say, hey, I need something from this point. And I say, oh, you want this one?
Not sustainable.
Obviously not okay. What I'm actively involved with doing right now is we are moving stuff over to a knowledge base. We're just started with a company called Knowledge Owl, who so far I love them. They're adorable. They're great. They're relatively new in the market and they're like super hungry. So they're really, really like helpful, which is always fun. So we are actually going, I'm building a whole knowledge infrastructure where our salespeople and even the other marketing people have dropped down, sort of like you do with online shopping, where you can say, oh, I want a shirt that is red, that's at $20 to $44, and it needs to be in size medium. I've got that for our product lines, our use cases, verticals, sub-verticals, and also which stage of the funnel it is. We are, I think, about maybe a quarter of the way of getting all of our content into this, and it's turning out to be a lot more work than originally anticipated. But when we get it there, it's going to be awesome, because people won't have to come just to me. They'll be able to go into the database and say, here are the different criteria I need, and then it will spit out, oh, here is all of the webinars about software developers who are using video for corporate communications that has to do with the webcasting product or the virtual meetings product.
So it sounds like you're talking about a place where not only is content in the same place, like you have all content in one central place, but you're also enabling people that are more downstream, the people that are consumers of this content that know they're part of the business.
Exactly.
You're not leaving all the decision making up to them. You're making it very easy for them to understand what piece of content should work at this point in a customer interaction.
Exactly. That's the idea, is that the sales reps, that the customer success reps can go in and do a lot of this more self-serve. And they can find exactly what they need and where in the process they are. If they need to find something specifically for adoption for a customer that's already bought something, that they can find this. The key with this, the thing I'm learning, is it's all about the metadata. So you need to put a lot of thought into the metadata, and then a lot of thought into creating it. Like, it's not just about uploading the piece. You need to think about, how are they going to use it? What are the different circumstances?
That's what makes it findable. Cicek, I want to go to you now. What you described was I think very interesting. This was the telehealth initiative was something that you had in the works, but obviously it was accelerated pretty dramatically when all this happened. So how, kind of hearing what Rebecca has described, just in terms of right piece of content, right time, maybe a bunch of new content that needs to be created very quickly. How have you, what is basically the approach that you're taking? Because you've had to pivot and also do things pretty quickly.
Yeah, so our industry is a lot more regulated than other industries, by the way. So every promotional piece and every content we build has to go through a promotional review committee that is composed of a lawyer, a regulatory body, and a medical person, as well as marketing. So what we do, we use a platform called Viva. So we use that platform actually to put materials into the review committees, review and approval. And everything is stored. So we have a library within Viva platform for all the materials that are approved. So anyone, if I'm not there, can do an advanced search and pull up a material that is not expired, obviously, but that's still good, valid, approved, and repurpose it as per their needs. And we do have categories within the system too. So if it's a healthcare provider piece, it's categorized that way. If it's a patient piece, it's categorized that way. So we do have a lot of content, but besides that, we do create a core messaging platform. It's like a guidance document. It's like a brand guide, core messaging document that, everyone is able to pull quickly what the key core messages if they need to repurpose and create a new material. So there's things that we use just to, enhance our content. And we also have different content for, obviously, social media. We have different content for other digital activities like paid search, banners. We have a library of all of those that anyone can at any time have access to and use. I have to also say, for our Salesforce specifically, we do have another platform where they can order materials online, and they can choose whatever they need. Meaning, if they're going to a conference, they can choose conference materials. and so forth. So according to their audience and who they're going to speak to, they're going to speak to a nurse versus a doctor, right? So I think building content specific to your audience is also important, not just the channel, but the audience. So, and categorizing and making it available that way easily, to everyone within the organization is critical.
Got it. Thank you. And so I want to jump over to Cliff, because I see sort of a similarity just in terms of what Cicek described in terms of how they've had to kind of accelerate or pivot a little bit and really kind of focus on those initiatives. You've had some learnings. You've had, all sorts of things you've needed to think about, but you've also you're kind of emerging out of this with some realizations about, really what kind of company you are, and maybe there are some insights into areas of opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, listen, unprecedented times call for unprecedented creativity and collaboration. And, you can get paralyzed from this, or you could use this as an opportunity to rethink your business models. Imagine a company like ours that does 20,000 events a year. One of the number one things missed by most of us on this call is probably live music. And, you started to see what different companies were doing with events. Everything has become very virtual, but right out of the box, we teamed up with Fox Television and did a living room, the first ever living room kind of concert with Elton John as a host.
Wow.
And we had performers like David Grohl, we had Alicia Keys, we had the amazing talent that actually played from their living room, but we raised $13 million for COVID relief. So that was the first out of the box thing we did. So now with 20,000 events that we do a year, including the iHeartRadio Music Festival and everything else we have, we've had to figure out how to pivot and how do we do virtual events, but also monetize these. But we're looking at some of our biggest events right now and figuring out the win-win, for sponsors that have come back every year. And this has been really a big part of their marketing strategy. So that's one area where we're challenged, and we're continuing to have conversations. But like I said earlier, the podcast piece of this has exploded, because if you think of Shonda, who is the producer of shows like Scandal and Grey's Anatomy, she came to iHeart basically saying, I can't do television production right now. So how about a podcast? And now we have partnered with her to do a whole series of podcasts that she's going to be doing it's called Shonderland. Cool. So what's really cool about that is that it's easier to work at lightning speed, to get something to market. But, we have the platform to be able to promote it. So during this time, we've been able to get podcast downloads from, say, 50,000 a month to in the millions, because we have 850 radio stations across the country. Depending on the audience, we can promote those.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how a lot of this has gotten us to think differently about how we, about the plethora of platforms we have and how to leverage them.
So you've been really nimble, and you've done some really creative things kind of in reaction. I'm guessing a lot of these things are just going to stick because they're, you kind of go, hey, this works. This is in many ways a new platform for us. But what did, when all of this happened, what were the biggest challenges from a content perspective, and what continue to sort of be the things you feel like you need to improve?
Well, like I said earlier, the fact that, broadcasting from someone's home was completely new to us. It's something that made us very nervous. But that is something I don't know if we're going to stick with once we reopen. But there are certain things, we kind of, like everyone on the call, we've realized there are certain things. This has been like the biggest experiment ever in history of people working from home. So now we're looking at, let's just say 7,500 salespeople across the country who are being trusted to work out of their homes and their living rooms in their bunny slippers. So it's like, producing is producing. So the fact of the matter is that there's a trust that has been established with the workforce that people really want to do good work. So that's been a big change for us. So as we're reopening, even the sales teams are being told you're the last ones coming back, which is unusual. I think the other positive thing has been we do a CEO series where we interview CEOs you should know, and it's been really hard to pin CEOs down because they travel all the time. And now that they're at home, it's been very easy to be able to to have them come on the program, and we're like overflowing with CEOs that want to be part of the series. So in terms of that, I think the other piece is audience. Right now, you have businesses on this call who probably had a geographical reach, but now, I have a friend who has a yoga studio, and she has clients in California that do her yoga class every day. That never would have been able to happen for a small business. So you have to ask yourself, maybe they won't do away with these virtual classes. Maybe they will do some in studio classes, but they have completely changed their model.
Yeah.
So I think that some of the things that we're going to keep are clearly using the power of video and these platforms like we're on now, and being able to figure out how we can continue to use that. But the key word is monetization.
Yeah.
We do have to figure out, how do we make up for revenue that has gone away? How do we pivot on that in that respect?
Yeah, I want to move to Gary in just a second, but on that, we at Adobe, we have a really interesting, we have a team called Brand Purpose, and they get us involved in lots of different initiatives in the community. And one of them was a Bay Area museum. I think maybe there were seven or eight museums. And I kind of went, yeah, I'm going to volunteer for this. And so I got involved in this again, all virtually. But a lot of them are doing, opening up the museums virtually. Like, come on, like take a look at these exhibits and so on. And that's great. But again, the question that all of them kind of came back to was, at some point, we're going to have to figure out how to monetize. We need revenue. Definitely their supporters, their like corporate supporters, or other donors, people who give to the organization are there, and they're supportive, and they're not stepping away, but they do need to find that way to monetize engagement. Okay, Gary,
Yeah.
I want to come to you, and you had an interesting challenge over the last little while, and I'd love you to just kind of level set for us a little bit though, and talk about, from a content perspective, what kind of kept you up at night before this happened, and then like what it looks like now.
Well, it keeps me up all the time. I think the reality for us mostly is there was a lot of fear. And as you've all probably seen in the news, people talk about nursing home environments or long-term care environments, senior environments, places where people are living very close together and engaged close together all the time, have become hotbeds for the spread of the coronavirus. So what were we doing? How were we protecting the residents who all are wheelchair users who live in our long-term care community? So although we skew much younger than most other facilities, we have people as young as 18, 19, and 20. So our median age is about 52. But people are significantly impaired. No one is on their own steam, as it were, all in motorized chairs. So how do you protect them, protect the staff who are providing constant care, close connection care, and how do you share that with the families, the caregivers, the families of the residents, our donors, etc. So what is the balance between information that needs to be shared, information that should be protected, and information that doesn't need to be shared publicly? So a couple of things that we did immediately in the beginning of March is we created a new employee portal so that employees were able to log in from wherever, because the bulk of our workforce, when you think about it, are some of the nursing divisions, and they're not at a computer every day. So they're not always to go on the intranet, the employee intranet, because they're working with residents day in and day out. So having a place for a protected, password-controlled employee portal, allowing us to provide all the updates, specific details of numbers in the house, what we call Inglis House, our long-term care community, staff numbers, the numbers of people who have recovered and are back to work, all the good stories and the shout outs of all the amazing work that's being done day in and day out. We also created an online, a 24-hour support hotline that was for families to be able to call in. It was a one-way communication, so that we were providing updates to them. They knew where to call if they had specific questions within a resource list. And we were now churning out regular communications, weekly communications to all of the constituents. We weren't holding back. We knew we wanted to be transparent. We wanted to share our numbers and what we were doing to protect our staff and our residents, but we had to make sure that we were balancing that so that we were not providing information that would scare people more, but also would make people feel comfortable knowing that we're doing what we need to do as best we can. And yes, numbers ticked up because it was the nature of this disease, in that asymptomatic folks weren't being flagged in the early days because testing wasn't done to everybody. And we have found that the process by which we've worked communication-wise has really turned into a significant positive for us. Family members, residents have really explained how much they appreciate the constant communication, the honesty of the communication, where we've fallen short, where we've made mistakes. Yeah. Et cetera. And so we find that that kind of transparency really has made a huge difference.
And so, Gary, what I'm trying to understand from you also is like how much of like you've described something that seems to be working pretty well. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious about how much of it is because you were working pretty well before, and even just like the nature and just kind of the transparency with which you communicated was already there versus a shift that you had to make, or a change that you had to make, or did your content engine itself kind of have to improve or change in some way?
It did, absolutely changed. I think when you think about people who are in these kinds of situations, families, loved ones, whoever are coming in and out, visiting, so that there's a constant connection that you have to the people in some of these environments. So you don't need to get an update all the time to know how Joe is doing because you go to visit Joe twice a week. All of a sudden that had to be shut down. No more visitation, number one. No more residents were able to go out of their rooms because of safety protocols. So all of a sudden, the regular communication that we were doing, which was not a weekly communication by any means, and we were always transparent, but it wasn't the level of communications that we were starting to do, and we had to totally ratchet that up. We had some people on the senior management of the administration of the nursing facility who were like, well, I don't know, we shouldn't share these numbers, we shouldn't tell people this, and we all advocated and said, no, absolutely we have to, and they realized, yes, that was the right decision. There was that concern first, but so we did have to make a change to ratchet up the amount of communication, the frequency of the communication, and the level of depth for the communication.
Got it. Thank you very much for that. I think that was, very insightful. I'm sure that no matter what industry people are in, there are pieces that they're going to pull from that, and maybe will be useful when they go back to the office, when they shut off this Zoom meeting and go to the next one.
Exactly.
All right, awesome. I kind of want to shift. We have probably 12 minutes or so before we break up into the smaller groups again. And I'm hoping that this is giving everybody lots of sort of interesting things that they want to talk about once they get back into the smaller groups for the remaining 20 minutes or so. Now, when I think about, again, kind of going back to this, this idea of the content engine, I would love the panelists to think a little bit about what is missing from the technology, what is missing from the, your processes, and really kind of look, and again, this is where, I said to the panelists folks, like, you don't have to be the expert on everything. Come to this with like an objective of wanting to learn it as well, because, we're trying to figure stuff out as we go along. And certainly, at Adobe, I'm doing a talk with one of our creative directors at a virtual conference in a couple of weeks. And we're talking about some of the stuff that's like still, really broken after all these years. And after us, we're like, in many ways, we're like the shoemaker's kids, right? We've got all this stuff. We've acquired all this technology. We've got digital experience technology. We've got all the best creative technologies, but, we've got 25,000 employees at this company. And sometimes it all just doesn't work like it's supposed to. And I think we're all sort of in that boat. So what I'd love the panelists, and I'm going to go back to you, Jeff, to sort of say, like, ask you to comment on what do you think is missing when it comes to content for many organizations to kind of get to these, solve these problems we're all talking about here, and comment on whether you think it's teams, technology, any combination that you're seeing from your vantage.
Sure. So I would say that the technology is all there. So if you want to be in the content business and you want to build out an ecosystem, there's probably not much you couldn't do taking content from creation through distribution and do it dynamically. Challenge is, it's like a shiny new toy. You get a new platform. Like, for instance, I was the first company to install Adobe Experience Manager 6.2. So for my past company, I was a part of an insurance company, and it was great to have the tool, but congratulations, you have the tool. Congratulations, how the heck do you use it? So some of these tools can be complicated, and they need to be used. People think you buy it, you turn it on, and you're in business. You're not. The devil's in the details. So we just installed HubSpot. And my team would create landing pages, would tie in emails into HubSpot, and creating, the ecosystem. So I think the technology is there. I would say to people, don't overcomplicate it. If you don't need all the pieces right away, you need your content first and foremost. That's the fuel. You can have a Ferrari, and without the fuel, the Ferrari goes nowhere. So figure out what you need to do, what your goals are, who your audience is, create the content for them. And I would come up with a progression. And I'm not going to give a progression to people on the phone because every company is different. But I would say start with exactly what your goals are, who you need to reach, and create the content, and then figure out the platform pieces. Is it email? Is it email tied to landing pages? Is it a CMS tied to everything? Because it's very complicated. And if you want to be sophisticated, you're going to spend millions and piss everyone off in your company, because it's all about the endpoint, which is 10 years down the road. So I'd say don't stake the flag too far down the road. Know what your top priorities are and take it one step at a time.
You said something about just make the content, like start with just making the content. I would add to that a lot of companies, don't think enough about like what the, I'm going to use a scary word, what the architecture looks like. And so let's use a friendlier word, what the map looks like, what the picture looks like of really like the workflows, the stakeholders, the consumers of your content. And this is something that, you could grab a bunch of, during COVID, I look at this nice box of Sharpies I have. This is one of my little investments. This is something that just take a whiteboard and Sharpies, and any one of you or someone on your team can start like mapping out what it looks like. And that's something that so many companies neglect to do before they jump into like RFP for this kind of technology, that kind of technology. And believe me, I'm telling you, like, you got to buy technology. I work for a technology company. I want you to buy my technology. However, I want you to be successful with it as well. And it does mean really sort of understanding what that landscape looks like. So when you said just make the content, I would also kind of argue that as you're making content, and this is my pitch around content velocity, like content needs to be made with some sense of purpose, some sense of like the channels where it's going to show up, some sense of what you're wanting to have it accomplish, and where in the, you used the word funnel, Rebecca, earlier, like where does it show up in that funnel? But also understanding and what you're hearing from some of the folks here, like you, Rebecca, is we got to be nimble with it. We need to be able to reuse content for multiple purposes. iHeart needs, in this new world where they're going, oh my gosh, look at this opportunity. If they can't like do a quick cut on a video or another piece of content to repurpose it for different channels, they're going to be reinventing the wheel every time. And so I think that's where, like, as you're starting to think about this, and I think what I'm hearing from you, Jeff, is that, don't stop the content engine and get like paralyzed by, oh my gosh, we don't know what's perfect for everybody yet and all those channels, but do have some sense of how this content that you create can proliferate and be useful and effective with different audiences through different channels. And I think that's where, people like Rebecca, content marketers and content strategists, like some of the ones I work with at Adobe, really think about those kinds of things. Same question, Cicek, I want to jump over to you. Again, I applaud you for the launch, and you guys obviously, pulled some all-nighters to make that happen. What do you sort of feel is maybe missing, or an opportunity to do it even better?
Yeah, so what I'm seeing missing, and we're constantly working on, is performance management, right? So, I mean, it's great to build the core content or adjusted content, like, different times requires different content, right? We built them, but now how do we track the performance of what we do? I think performance management is key. So we're building certain platforms, but I wish we had more technology available to us that can, like, almost instantly can give us the signals of what message is picking up better versus another one. I mean, we obviously tag a lot of the digital initiatives that we have, so we kind of know the patient click-through rates and all of the, some of the softer metrics, but we want to tie them more to hardcore metrics for us, which is basically, at the end of the day, it's the prescriptions that are written. So how can I make sure that, my message is adjusted on the day, daily? And I know there's CRM platforms and there's platforms that make you, do those, enable those adjustments. Even your subject line sometimes on an email matters, right? People click seeing a subject line. Which one works better? Which one resonates better with your customers? I think those are really important. But then again, pulling through those adjustments all the way down to saying, hey, we did these adjustments in the performance of our channels and messaging, and here's what the outcome optimized, right, in the prescription. So I think that's the whole journey that we're trying to build, and especially it's most important for us to be able to demonstrate that to our executive team, that what we do works.
Got it. I sent you something that, again, it's not a plug for a product or anything. It's something you might want to play around with. And it's got in there some ideas around, like, how do you get value from different ways of handling your content, kind of where are you at in terms of maturity, a lot of times,
new product.
Yeah. And, you mentioned something, Cicek, in your industry, like just the governance and all the approvals and the stakeholders that are required there. So do you have, are there weaknesses in certain areas that, you need to sort of shore up? And sometimes it's getting the sort of executive buy-in to be able to improve some of these things. Sometimes it's some of the simple tactics that some of the folks in the room have been sharing here. Gary, I want to jump over to you. I know you had a point you wanted to make, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on areas of improvement.
Just one thing since you're all here, I think it's important to note that as we are all looking at developing content, we need to make sure that content is accessible across the board. You need to make sure that content is accessible to people of varying access points, people who use assistive or adaptive technology. Oftentimes when people think about accessibility, they think about someone who's visually impaired or hearing impaired. They don't think about someone who cannot use their hands to access a computer or cannot speak to use speech recognition to talk to a computer. So doing things that provide links that explain what the link is, not just read more, learn more. That's the worst thing that you can do. Doing things like making sure your alt tags are very clear, making sure that you tag the imagery and the documentation, but everything you can do, because people access content now from very many different sources, whether they have a physical impairment, a visual impairment, a hearing impairment, a speech impairment. Think about accessibility on your website as well as your content that you provide in different platforms. So I'm just pushing that out from a disability standpoint. Content for accessibility for all.
Got it. Thank you very much for that. We're going to shift a little bit here because I know I have a feeling you guys want to get back into the smaller rooms. So what we're going to do is I remember, panelists, I asked you to come up with like a piece of advice, and we're going to kind of do a round robin here. And we're going to go back to Rebecca, because we didn't hear from you on this last round. So what's your, what's the takeaway you want to give these guys as we kind of leave the main room here? Just take a few seconds to give us something.
I think it's important to balance ambition with forgiving yourself. In that, I mean, I go to a bunch of this kind of stuff, you pay attention to what's going on in, industry, LinkedIn, follow stuff, whatever. And you hear a lot of trends. And there is a huge amount of stuff being done around attribution, around ABM, around a lot of automated systems of content recommendation engines and everything. And it's all really, really cool. And I suspect most of us can't afford to do all of it, both on a budget perspective and then also on the how much time and bandwidth it takes from your team. So I think it's really important to keep pushing towards doing things better and working towards the current industry standards and the cutting edge stuff. But I think it's also important to be able to forgive yourself and sometimes step back and say, you know what? We can do ABM really well, or we can do social really well, or we can do both of them really crappily. Let's pick a thing and we're going to do that really well. You're not going to be able to do, unless you like a big enough company that you have a really huge marketing team, you're not going to be able to do all of it, and you're not going to be able to do all of it well. So sometimes you have to forgive yourself and say, you know what, I won't keep up on every single trend.
Forgive yourself. That's an awesome takeaway. Thank you for that. Okay, Cliff.
Yeah, so, I mean, Jeff said it. I loved what Jeff said about the Ferrari and the fuel. But in essence, the content has got to be engaging. And a lot of people think that, this is going to be interesting to so many people, and they're not the audience. So they tend to really make it not engaging. And I think that is detrimental, because of the fact that it's designed to draw people in, and it's really not supposed to be about the brand. It's supposed to be about the subject matter that draws people in. And it's too many times I see the content being very, very much tainted towards what the company does as opposed to what the issue is.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then the other thing is what's the use of building that content if you don't have the right audience? And so I would say that you have to be really sure not to just build it and put it out there, but to really think about who you are sending it to and what the ROI is. Because to someone's point earlier who said that they just spent $1 million on something, and does it work or not? Yes, you do have to have the metrics to measure success, but you also have to make sure that you have the right recipe. And that's where I see a lot of people fall on the sword. So that would be my advice, is really to make sure the quality of the content is there, and that what you're putting out there is relevant and time sensitive.
Great. So Cicek, quick little 30-second takeaway for the group here.
Yes, so I will also say, even for the same audience, I think it's important to understand what your customer is going through. What's their journey, right? So build the journey. Maybe you don't have to reach out to them everywhere throughout the journey, and you can pick a couple of spots that are more easy for you to reach out to them, and then use those spots wherever they are. Find those more vulnerable points that they are going through, and reach out to them at that point. You can save a lot of dollars, in your marketing budget by doing that, and you can be a lot more effective. So
sounds good. Thanks. Thank you very much. Jeff, what's your piece of advice you'd like to leave folks with?
Yeah, so I agree with most of what the panelists said. So I just, 3 quick things. Inclusion, especially if you have to deal with legal or privacy. Get them involved up front, make them part of the process, and remove that barrier. 2, don't talk to yourself, meaning you think you know what your audience wants from you, but you don't. So figure out what they want and be able to make that connection. And 3, data. If you want to get the CFO on your side and CEO, show them what you're doing. And even if it doesn't work at times, prove out the model. I have never been denied funding when I can show a business model behind it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Gary, penultimate word from you.
Real quickly, I think one of the penultimate immutable laws of branding is it's not what you think you are, it's what they think you are. Take that into your content. It's what they need, not what you want to tell them. And sometimes return on mission is equally as important as return on investment.
Yeah, so with that, I hope we're probably ready to get into the breakouts.